From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
しかし1号機、3号機の
There were hydrogen explosions at reactors number 1 and number 3, and there was a fire at reactor number 4. There is radiation in this area, and the level is pretty high.
Japan is on the verge of a nuclear catastrophe. A third explosion has rocked a nuclear plant hit by the earthquake and tsunami. The blast damaged one of the reactor's containment vessels for the first time. High levels of radiation are leaking. We'll get the latest. Then, more than 1,000 troops from Saudi Arabia cross into Bahrain to defend the royal family from pro-democracy protesters. The king has ordered a 3-month state of emergency. The United States refuses to condemn the Saudi deployment.
I think you have to understand we've seen the reports that you're talking about. This is not an invasion of a country.
And in Yemen, anti-government protesters are growing as U.S.-backed President Ali Abdullah Saleh refuses to step down. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Sharif Abdul Quddus, filling in for Amy Goodman. High levels of radiation have leaked from the Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan after a third explosion at the crippled plant. The latest blast seriously damaged the number 2 reactor's steel containment structure. In addition, a fire briefly broke out at the plant's reactor 4. Officials just south of the plant reported up to 100 times the normal levels of radiation. Japan's Tokyo Electric Power Company said it has pulled out 800 workers from the nuclear plant due to safety concerns. Some 70,000 residents have been forced to evacuate their homes. Another 140,000 people have been ordered not to step outside. Low levels of radiation are now floating toward Tokyo. Earlier today, Japanese Cabinet Secretary Yukio Edano issued a frank warning about the crisis.
There is no mistake that this is a level that can have an effect on humans. People within the area should not have contact with the air as much as possible, and I would like to ask people to stay indoors.
Japan is also dealing with a humanitarian crisis as millions of people in Japan's devastated northeast are spending a 4th night without water, food, or heating in near-freezing temperatures. Officials expect the death toll from Friday's earthquake and tsunami to exceed 10,000. On Monday, more than 2,000 bodies washed up on the beaches of the Miyagi prefecture. We'll have more on Japan after headlines. The nuclear crisis in Japan has sparked a debate over the future of nuclear energy across the globe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has announced that the country's 7 nuclear reactors built before 1980 will be shut down for a 3-month review of German plant safety. On Monday, Merkel suspended plans to extend the life of Germany's 17 nuclear reactors. In news from the Middle East, the King of Bahrain has declared a state of emergency for 3 months following weeks of pro-democracy protests. The King's announcement came one day after 1,000 Saudi troops crossed into Bahrain to help defend Bahrain's ruling family. Pro-democracy protesters have described the Saudi presence on the island as a declaration of war. In a statement, Bahraini opposition groups said, quote, "We consider the entry of any soldier or military machinery into the Kingdom of Bahrain's air, sea or land territories a blatant occupation." Bahrain is a close U.S. ally and home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. In Libya, forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi have captured the city of Zawara, west of Tripoli, and are battling under-equipped rebel fighters for control of the oil town of Brega. In recent days, Gaddafi's forces have won back control of several key cities. Meanwhile, debate continues at the international level over whether the UN Security Council should institute a no-fly zone. On Monday, German Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle expressed deep concerns about the no-fly zone.
Ich selbst habe auch noch einmal für die Bundesregierung sehr klar gemacht, dass
I have reiterated on behalf of the German government that we remain very skeptical about military intervention in Libya. A no-fly zone is a military intervention and always has to be considered with consequences. I do not want Germany to be drawn into a long-lasting war in North Africa.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister David Cameron has openly backed a no-fly zone and rejected charges that it amounts to an act of war.
I think what we're seeing in Libya is different, and it's an uprising of a people against a leader, and it's quite conditioned, and different, and no one is talking about invasions or boots on the ground or the rest of it.
Meanwhile, in West Bank and Gaza, tens of thousands of Palestinians are protesting today, calling for an end to the internal Palestinian split between Hamas and Fatah. The protests were largely organized by young people. The father of accused Army whistleblower Bradley Manning has spoken out for the first time since Manning was arrested for leaking classified information to WikiLeaks. Since June, Manning has been held in solitary confinement on a Marine brig in Virginia. In an interview with PBS Frontline, Brian Manning said he was shocked by the conditions under which his son was being held.
I mean, this is someone that has not been, gone to trial or been convicted of anything. And that's prompted me to, to come out and go forward. I mean, they worry about people down, in a base in Cuba, but here they are, have someone on our own soil and, under their own control, and they're treating them this way. I mean, it's, it just you just can't believe it. I mean, it's shocking enough that I would come out of, our silence as a family and say, now then, this, you've crossed the line. This is wrong.
The New York Times and Los Angeles Times both published editorials today condemning the treatment of Bradley Manning. The editors of the New York Times write, quote, "The military has been treating him abusively in a way that conjures creepy memories of how the Bush administration used to treat terror suspects," they wrote. Last Friday, then State Department spokesperson P.J. Crowley accused the Pentagon of being ridiculous, counterproductive, and stupid in its treatment of Manning. Crowley was forced to resign from his post over his comments. Former Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide has decided to return to Haiti this week ahead of Saturday's presidential runoff election. Aristide has lived in exile in South Africa since 2004, when he was ousted in a U.S.-backed coup. On Monday, the U.S. State Department urged Aristide to postpone his trip.
However, former President Aristide has chosen to remain outside of Haiti for 7 years. To return this week can only be seen as a conscious choice to impact Haiti's elections. We would urge former President Aristide to delay his return until after the electoral process has concluded, to permit the Haitian people to cast their ballots in a peaceful atmosphere. A return prior to the election may potentially be destabilizing to the political process.
Jean-Bertrand Aristide's attorney, Ira Kurzban, spoke to Democracy Now! On Monday.
Chosen to remain outside.
In news from Wisconsin, Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald is claiming that the 14 Senate Democrats who fled the state to block a union-busting bill are still in contempt of the Senate, even though they have returned. In a letter released Monday, Fitzgerald said the Democrats cannot vote in committee. He wrote, quote, "They are free to attend hearings, listen to testimony, debate legislation, introduce amendments, and can cast votes to signal their support or opposition. But those votes will not count and will not be recorded." Meanwhile, Wisconsin Democrats have announced they have collected nearly half the signatures necessary to begin recalling Republican senators who backed the bill to strip most public employees of their right to collectively bargain. In news from Iowa, lawmakers are considering a bill that would make it illegal for animal rights activists to go undercover and record video of farm animal abuse. Backed by Iowa's agricultural industry, the bill would impose fines and prison sentences on anyone who seeks agricultural employment in order to capture footage. In recent years, undercover videos have revealed shocking conditions at a number of locations and have led to plant closures and meat recalls. A group of Guatemalans who were deliberately injected with syphilis and gonorrhea in the 1940s have sued the U.S. government. The experiments were conducted without the subjects' permission between 1946 and 1948. The Obama administration issued an apology last year about the tests, but the U.S. has refused to offer compensation to the victims and their families. Visit democracynow.org for our interview with medical historian Susan Reverby, who uncovered the secret experiments. Democratic Senator Al Franken of Minnesota has announced plans to introduce a bill that would criminalize violations of net neutrality. Franken has described net neutrality as the most important free speech issue of our time. On Monday, Senator Franken spoke with the website TechCrunch.com.
My concern is that as there's concentration in media and fewer and fewer companies own the internet service providers, there is the fear that they will do paid prioritization, have a faster lane, and essentially consumers will be getting really content that's paid for by large corporations that can afford the faster lane.
And a new survey of the nation's millionaires has found that more than 40% of millionaires don't feel rich despite their seven-figure wealth. Many said they wouldn't feel truly wealthy until their assets hit the $7.5 million mark. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Sharif Abdel Quddus.